There's an old urban legend in downtown St. Pete I was reminded of a little while back ago when I was walking. Some visitors were just coming out of the restroom. You know that octagonal building right on the corner of, Bayshore and 2nd Avenue? You know that turn where you go onto where the pier is? You know, they were coming out of that restroom and they were all laughing and talking about that story that many of us are familiar with. Are you familiar with that story? You know, I hear it all the time from the trolley car and Segway tour guides. In fact, I know it so well, I could be a tour guide. In fact, I'll pretend I'm a tour guide and you can be the tourists, okay? Well, welcome to historic downtown St. Petersburg. Where are you old folks from? I'll skip that part. Well, if you look here to the left side here, you'll see here this octagonal-shaped, Romanesque revivalist building here, and it's referred to as Comfort Station 1. And it was designed and built by Henry S. Taylor, a renowned and celebrated architect of that day and age. It was built in the first restroom built in 1927. And he built it, if you will notice, very strong representation and very strong resemblance to a building that we will see just a few blocks south of here, a larger rendition of St. Mary's Catholic Church. Now the story is that when he built St. Mary's Catholic Church, one of the other buildings that he had built, he wasn't paid in full. And so to get back at them, he decided that he was going to model this restroom exactly like St. Mary's Church. And so in spite of them, he thought to get back at them, he was going to build this little St. Mary's Church so that anybody that would go inside of this building, the first thing that they would see would be a public toilet. And so even now today, when they look inside there and see this building, the locals still refer to it as Little St. Mary's. Well, anyway, I'm hearing these people talk about this as they're coming out of this restroom, and they're laughing about it. So I turn around, and I say, well, you know, that's one perspective. I said, another perspective is, yes, that restroom was built in 1927. Another perspective is that St. Mary's was built in 1929. 2 years after this restroom was built. You know? But why let the truth get in the way of a good story, right? I said, but I tell you what, I'll tell you something that the tour guides probably didn't tell you. That restroom is haunted. Only on the ladies' side, though. Yeah. You know, you go in there on the hottest day of the year. You know, you can go on in the hottest summer day, and you can go in there and you'll get these cold breezes. And they'll tell you, you'll look in the mirror, and you'll see these misty images in the mirror. Some will say that you'll go into the stall, and you'll look, and you'll see these shoes in the other stall. And it's not just ordinary shoes, real old shoes, like from the 1930s. And you'll hear this voice that'll say, I'm Agnes, and I've been here a long, long time. And then you'll get up and you'll look around, there's nobody there. And people wonder, who is this person? You know who I think it is? Some poor soul, a parishioner from St. Mary's, who wanted to come to church and went to the wrong building. All these years. That's another perspective. 3 perspectives on one place, right? Those poor tourists, they didn't know what to think of me. Well, you know, today's gospel, what's interesting is that we have one story, but we have 3 gospels of the 4 that have 3 different perspectives on the story. For instance, I find it interesting from Matthew's perspective It says that Jesus made his disciples get in a boat to go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Now, different translations will say made or compelled or obligated, but we don't know why. If you go to John's gospel, his perspective kind of tells you why. Because right beforehand, Jesus feeds the multitude, the 5,000, with just 5 loaves and 2 fish. The people see this, and they rise up because they want to make Jesus the king. And so Jesus makes his disciples get in the boat to go away because Jesus knows that his disciples still kind of see him from an earthly perspective and still see him kind of from an earthly leadership perspective, want to get in the way, and so he wants to deal with this alone. And so we kind of see that. From Mark's perspective, at the end of the story, Jesus gets into the boat, the wind dies down, the disciples are astounded, but they don't understand. They look and think back about the loaves. They don't understand about this whole thing about Jesus on the water because their hearts are hardened. But in Matthew's gospel, the one that we just heard, Jesus gets in the boat, the winds die down, and they give homage. And they say, truly, this is the Son of God. They understand. But they doubt. Peter doubts. And in fact, throughout all of Matthew's gospel, they understand, but they doubt. They believe, but they doubt. In fact, at the very end of Matthew's gospel, they see the risen Christ. Jesus gives them the commission. The same words that are used in this story today are used at the very end of Matthew's gospel. They give him homage, and they doubt. Matthew sees the reality of human nature, this mixture of faith and lack of faith, and it goes throughout the narrative of Matthew's gospel. These two perspectives, faith and lack of faith. We've heard some of it already during these Sundays when we've heard Matthew's gospel. We heard about it from the centurion who wanted Jesus to heal his servant. Jesus was going to heal the servant. But the centurion said, no, you don't need to go. Your word is enough. Jesus was impressed by his faith and said to the others, no one in Israel has such faith as this man. But then in the next chapter, the other storm in the boat, Jesus is asleep. And the disciples are afraid and wake Jesus up. Master, aren't you afraid that we're going to perish? And Jesus calms the seas and then says to his disciples, where was your faith? Why were you afraid? And then a little while longer, another chapter or two, we see the woman with the hemorrhage suffering for 12 years. All she does is touch the tassel, just the tassel of his cloak, and she's healed. Jesus knows this and says to her, courage, daughter, your faith has saved you. Great faith. Then the next chapter, Jesus goes to his hometown of Nazareth. And he can't do hardly anything. No mighty deeds, no miracles, because of their lack of faith. Next week, you're going to hear the story of the Canaanite woman who asks Jesus to heal her daughter. And Jesus says, well, it's not right to give the food of the children to the dogs. And she says, well, even the dogs will eat the scraps from the master's table. And he says, great is your faith. Let it be done as you say. And then we have today, Peter sinking in the water. Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? That's Peter today. 2 weeks from now, you'll hear Peter's profession of faith. Who do people say that I am? Jesus asks. And it's Peter, not any of the other disciples. It's Peter who says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says, you are rock, and upon this rock I will build my church, upon this faith. So these two perspectives, faith and lack of faith, this duality, this mixture, this reality in human nature. So what is the perspective today, in today's gospel? Well, the perspective isn't that if you have enough faith, you can walk on water. Only God can walk on water. This is not a prosperity gospel. That's Joel Osteen's perspective. This is not Matthew's perspective. This is not the gospel's perspective. This is not the perspective of the cross. The perspective today is that faith is about believing, even in the storms, even when the winds and the waves are battering on us. Faith is about believing, even when we're sick, when we're ill, when we're afraid, when life is difficult, when we're confused, when things are complicated. Faith is about believing that Jesus is there with us in those storms. That Jesus is in the boat when it's rocking to and fro. That's the perspective. One perspective is Peter is sinking. Oh, you of little faith, why do you doubt? But the other perspective is Peter's crying out, save me, Lord. He's reaching out, clutching onto Jesus. That is faith. When you need God the most. Let's ask the Lord to give us that same grace. To cry out, to reach out in faith during the storms of life, when we need God the most. That's faith. It's all about the perspective. I had a friend who came to visit me last year. He stayed at the rectory with me. And big old rectories have a lot of, especially at night, are kind of creepy. You know, they have old noises and sounds. And came to my room at night and he said, "This place is spooky." And I said, did I ever tell you about Agnes? It's all about the perspective. God bless you.